Today, we are diving into a really cool new framework called Atlas. Think of it as a roadmap for building AI that can truly understand the entire world, not just the small part of it that speaks English. Let's get right into it. So, let's start with a fact that might actually surprise you. You know, AI feels like it's global, like it's everywhere. But its development has this massive, and I mean massive, English-centric blind spot. Over half of all the people using these AI models speak a language other than English. That's a huge disconnect, right, between who the technology is for and how it's actually being built. And this isn't just some small oversight. The researchers behind Atlas actually call it a critical gap. What that really means is that the teams building these incredible tools for literally billions of users are kind of flying blind. They're making huge decisions about cost and quality without a real data-driven playbook to guide that. And that brings us to the heart of the problem. For years now, we've had these things called scaling laws. They're basically a playbook for making bigger and better English-only AI models. But a guide for building multilingual models, it just hasn't existed until now. And that is exactly where this new research comes in. It introduces Atlas, a super practical set of scaling laws designed to fill that exact gap. It's basically the roadmap we've been missing for creating powerful models that can understand hundreds of languages. So how does Atlas actually work? Well, it takes this enormous, complicated challenge of multilingual AI and breaks it down into three simple, practical parts. Okay, so first, Atlas helps you figure out which languages are best to train together. Second, it gives you a clear formula for how to scale up your model and your data as you add more languages. And third, it helps you pick the most cost-effective way to train your model based on your budget. Let's break each of those down. So let's start with that first piece, decoding language synergies. This answers a really fundamental question. Like, if you want to build a great AI for Catalan, should you train it with Spanish data? Or maybe French data? Or, I don't know, even Russian? The key idea here is something called cross-lingual transfer. It's kind of the magic that happens when training a model on one language, say Spanish, actually makes it better at a different but related language like Catalan. Atlas is basically built on measuring this on a massive scale. What they ended up with is this incredible language compatibility map that turns what used to be hunches into hard data. And the results are fascinating, and a lot of them just make sense. You want to build a great Norwegian model? Use Swedish and German data. For Malay, Indonesia is your best friend. And here's a surprising one. For Arabic, Hebrew is actually a top helper language. And out of all this data, some really clear rules started to pop out. Turns out English, French, and Spanish are like universal donors. They help the most other languages. No surprise, the biggest sign of a good match is a shared script, like the Latin alphabet. And what's really fascinating is that the help isn't always a two-way street. Spanish helps Catalan way more than Catalan helps Spanish. Now for the second part of the Atlas roadmap. This one tackles a huge obstacle in multilingual AI known as the curse of multilinguality. The easiest way to think of this curse is like a capacity tax. If you have a model with a fixed size, a fixed amount of brain power, and you keep shoving more and more languages into it, its performance on each one starts to drop. Its brain just gets stretched too thin trying to learn everything at once. So naturally, this leads to the million-dollar question for any developer, right? If I want to double the number of languages my model supports, how much bigger exactly do I need to make the model? And how much more data do I need to feed it so I don't get hit with this curse? And this is where Atlas delivers its second huge breakthrough. The researchers ran over 700 experiments to figure this out, and they came up with a super clear, actionable rule to answer that exact question. And here's what they found. Here are the magic numbers. To double your languages and keep the same level of performance, you need to increase your model size by a factor of 1.18 and your data size by 1.66. What this really tells you is that you need a pretty big jump in data. But because of all that positive language transfer we just talked about, the model itself only needs to get a little bit bigger. Pretty cool, right? Okay, this brings us to the final and maybe the most practical piece of the Atlas roadmap. This is all about a very real-world decision every developer has to make. Should I build my model from scratch, or should I just build on top of one that already exists? So you've basically got two paths. Path A, you can pre-train a brand new model from the ground up. It costs a lot up front, but it can give you better results in the long run. Or there's path B. You take a powerful pre-existing multilingual model, what they call a checkpoint, and you just fine-tune it.
This gets you great performance super fast and super cheap. So the big question for anyone who's, working with a real-world budget is, which path is right for me? How do I know when it's actually worth it to spend all that extra cash to train a model from scratch?
And once again, Atlas gives us a data-driven answer. It all boils down to your compute budget, which is basically how many billions of words or tokens you can afford to train on. The secret is finding what the researchers call the crossover point. This is the exact moment where the expensive, from-scratch method actually starts to pay off and becomes better than just fine-tuning. For a typical 2 billion parameter model, this crossover happens after it's trained on somewhere between 144 and 283 billion tokens. And that gives us a final, beautifully simple rule of thumb. If your budget is below that crossover point, fine-tuning an existing model is your best bet, hands down. But if your budget is above it, you're going to get better results by pre-training from scratch. It's a concrete, budget-aware guideline that anyone can use. So, to wrap it all up, what Atlas really gives us is a practical roadmap for building global AI. It turns hunches into data, it helps us beat that curse of multilinguality, and it offers clear, budget-aware advice. At the end of the day, it's a guide to building AI that can finally serve the billions of people who don't speak English. And that leaves us with a really exciting question. Now that we have a real, data-backed roadmap for all the world's languages, what kind of truly global and inclusive AI can we finally start to build? What comes next?